בוקר טוב. היי. שלום, שלום. טוב. אוקיי, חודש טוב, בעזרת השם לשמות. Let me silence this. So, we were debating with the Pemikorot, without the Pemikorot, so I decided without because it's going to be a crazy rush through, for, I don't know, a few thousand years of Jewish halacha, and we have 40 minutes. So afterwards, if someone would be especially intrigued with any of these mekorot, we'll have whoever want to pick them up, they'll be right here in the front. So as is sometimes common in shurim for Chanukah, you take some halachic topic and you learn it like it's the interesting stuff, and then you end up turning it somehow into a metaphor. Most Chanukah shurim work that way. Similarly, so I want to take you through a very, very quick journey through the halachot that have to do with OUisrael TORAH. Okay. ואם אפשר להנמיך את ההד, זה יהיה ממש... Okay. The halachot regarding where do you light Chanukah candles. Okay, it's called inside, outside, the whole thing. And the truth is that that specific halacha has all kinds of contexts and implications, and it comes to my mind even Khatam Sofer goes through the whole halachic analysis and understands that definitely Ashkenazi women should be lighting Chanukah candles, and he looks around in Hungary in his time and he says, I don't see our women lighting Chanukah candles. So he has this whole historical analysis saying, to begin with, everybody was lighting outside in the evening, in the dark, and women outside in the dark. That's not tzniustic. So they didn't light, even though they were supposed to. And then when it came inward into the house, they continued not lighting. But we thought this is not our topic. I'm just saying that how different aspects of this discussion show up through this issue of inside outside. So let's see the original halacha. And it says in Masechet Shabbat, תנו רבנן, נר חנוכה מצווה להניחה על פתח ביתו מבחוץ. You're supposed to light Chanukah candles on the outside part of your entrance. And if you live in, Ba'aliyah, second floor or up, you put it next to the window to the Reshut HaRabim. And then it says, ובשעת הסכנה מניחה על שולחנו ודיו. And in the time of danger, he puts it on the dining room table, okay, on his table, and that's enough. Okay. Now it's interesting because this is not an afterthought; it's in the original formulation of this halacha. Okay, from the very beginning, I can think of one other mitzvah like this. We have mitzvat yibum. And from the beginning, they say, and if you can't do yibum, there's this chalitza, okay? But we don't have a lot of mitzvot that from the original formulation of the mitzvah, from the very, very beginning, they tell you, look, you should go this way, and if that doesn't work out, we already, from the very beginning, thought of the other way. Here in Ner Chanukah, that's the way it's expressed. You're supposed to do it outdoors, outside your entrance. If it doesn't work out because of danger, do it inside on your table. Now, Chanukah candle, it's interesting. I had many discussions with people about this. It seems like there's something very, very sentimental about the way you grow up with Chanukah candles. Because people that are used to lighting Chanukah candles inside, like somewhere in the house, it could be on the windowsill, but even on the dining room table, they feel very weird with lighting outside. They say, so you light the candles outside and you leave them all alone there. You come inside, there are no Chanukah candles. What is that all about? Okay? And people that grew up, like myself, lighting Chanukah candles out in the street, they say, what's this idea of Chanukah candles indoors? what kind of persona nefs is this? You know, and people feel very, very attached to their own idea of or how they grew up or what they're used to in this issue. Naturally, I guess. So we take, this is the original halacha from the time of early Tanaim, okay? And we're going to start running with it. So in the Shulchan Aruch, okay, we're many years later, like 16th century, it says, but we're going to go back and forth. It says, "V'shat hasakana she'no rashai lekayem hamitzvot menicho al shulchano v'deh." It explains to us what shat hasakana is. It says when you're not allowed to practice mitzvot. Now, there are all kinds of historical discussions of what shat hasakana is, and it's sometimes identified as the Zoroastric Persian religion. I'm not sure if that's accurate historically. It sounds more like the Gzerot of the Hegmon, other things that went on in Chanukah. But this idea that there is a time where it's too dangerous to just walk outside into the neighborhood, into the street, and light your Chanukah candles. In Austria, 13th century, okay, the Or Zarua, Rabbi Yitzchak Mivina, very important character. He established a new kind of smichat chachamim. After generations, there was no smicha. He says this, and it's interesting to hear. He says, and nowadays, when there's no danger, apparently in Vienna in the 13th century, there were 5 minutes of safety for the Jews. I don't know why you don't light candles in our yard, okay? So he says, now there's leika sakana, there's no danger, and the truth is, I have no idea why we're not lighting outside. Now, this is compact with information, okay? First, yes, there was a possibility to light outside. But second, the minhag is so strong that it is very clear that we're all lighting indoors, okay? And nobody's changing the minhag because now it's possible to light outdoors, okay? It's like, definitely the way he's formulating it, and we'll see it again soon, is because we're now in a situation where we could light outdoors, that only proves how strong the accepted halacha is to light indoors. So he just says, and I have no idea why we do it indoors, but that's what we do, okay? Rabbeinu Yerucham, shortly afterwards, like 50, 60 years afterwards, says, and now we're used to lighting it indoors, and sometimes we try in the garden, whatever we can, mishum deshchichi goyim v'ganavim, because there are many thieves and there are many goyim outside, surprise, surprise. And besides, if on the outer gate, okay, there's Tzurat HaPetach and we should be having a mezuzah there, but we don't do that because they're vandalists and they're thieves, and we stop putting mezuzot on the outside, okay? So, and we have this idea that it's always very nice to have a mezuzah on one side and a Chanukah on the other side to be mukaf b'mitzvot. So we do it on the inner petach, because there we already have a mezuzah, and there we can have this extra bonus of being surrounded by mitzvot. Okay. The Rema on the Shulchan Aruch already says, these days when we all light indoors, okay, it's like kind of halacha psuka. By the way, I thought this is an inner Ashkenazi discussion, but it turns out that in many Artzot Mizrach, Muslim countries, there was a similar discussion. There was more lighting outside than in Europe, but many people lit indoors, and they have similar discussions, and we'll hear some of them. Aruch HaShulchan also asked this question, why are we lighting indoors? And he says, well, in our countries, it's just too cold. It's December, it's not practical, okay? Now, the truth is, December in Yerushalayim is also quite cold, but we have the glass containers. So that's called an ashashit in halacha, and that appears as one of the things that you take into consideration. But the Aruch HaShulchan says snow, wind, winter, you can't do that. It brings to mind another mitzvah that has this issue, Sukkah, right? So we try to think, what's the difference between Chanukah and Sukkah? It's true that in Chutz La'aretz people don't sleep in the Sukkah, but they make tremendous efforts to eat kezait in the Sukkah, to have something, to build a Sukkah, to have... In Chanukah, they just put it indoors. Nobody offers to put a Sukkah indoors. So, maybe one is in October, one is December. So also a difference. Maybe one is the Oraita, one is the Rabbanan. But also we have to remember that in this specific the Rabbanan mitzvah, originally there was already an option of doing things indoor. So Sukkah doesn't have such an option. So it's also ifshar and i-ifshar. Okay, we really what we're curious about is what's going to happen when Jews come to Eretz Israel. Okay, so let's say a poskim from the last century. And interesting things go on. Rabbi Yitzchak Yaakov Weiss, okay, Minchat Yitzchak, he's started out in Hungary and Romania, and then he was in England. He was Av Bet Din in England, and then he came here to the Edah Haredit in Yerushalayim, and he says this. He says, "I found a source for this in Megillat Ta'anit, where it is stated." It is a mitzvah to place it, and if one is afraid of the letzim, okay, now this is one girsa of Megillat Ta'anit. Most girsot don't say that. They say goyim, but there's one girsa that says letzim. Now letzim is the mockers, the scoffers, the people who will make fun of you, okay? So if one is afraid of the letzim, ridicule or belittle the practice of lighting nerot, one should place it at the entrance of his house from the inside. And now, in our time, now he's sitting in Yerushalayim, this could be written in the 50s or the 60s, he says, and now in our times, it is not a time of danger, God forbid, but it is considered a time when there are many letzim, many scoffers. So what we do is one kindles the candles and the entrance from within, and he continues in saying, in the previous generations, they were able to light the Torah outward, al derech yafutzu ma'anotecha chutza. But in this generation, that Torah has been belittled, and the learners of Torah are ridiculed, and the Chachamim have no power to bring people lashiv ish midarko hara'a, and if you don't get on people's better side, they mock you and they attack you. Whoever has the brains, amaskilim be'etahi, will pull their hands from lighting their Torah outward, okay? They just put the candle in their home, and if they manage to educate their own people, their own family, dayo, okay? So we have here given a Dacharadit posek that says, look, there's no real danger, but I found in Megillat Ta'anit that it's not only about danger, it's about mockery, it's about letzim. And he looks outward, and we know the main issue in the mitzvah here is pirsum hanes, okay? And he looks outside, and he says, the outside these days is irrelevant. They're all letzim. There's nothing I can do about them. So at most, I can light candles on my own table, and if I manage to educate my own family, that's enough. The Radomsk Rebbe, Shlomo Radomsk, the Tiferet Shlomo, he's from Chassidut Polin in the 19th century. He writes, in the beginning, during the good times, they would place it at the entrance of one's house outward to publicize the miracle, for the miracles were then evident to everyone. However, in times of decree during the exile, one places it on the table and it suffices to express that the miracles are hidden. Okay? He says, we live in a period of nisim ustarim, okay? And there are no outward miracles, so that's what lighting indoors represents. In the future, he says, when Yichud Hashem will be restored properly, then the lights will go and descend and shine, exposing it to a wall. Okay, so there is here a explanation that as long as the Jew is in the experience of Nes Nistar, okay, and not Nes Nigle, he tries to shine inward and not to go out in the public and say, look, Pirsum HaNes, Kiddush Hashem, etc. Tov. And then we have the Dvar Yeshua, okay? So that's Yeshua Ehrenberg. He escaped in the Kessner train, and he was the Av Bet Din of Tel Aviv. He died 1975, and he says this: I'm puzzled what I have seen, that Jerusalem, the holy city, Tibaneh v'tikonen, and there's some who practice candle lightings outside. Okay? I do not know from whom this directive emerged, but it is clear that its authority was not greater than the Or Zarua, right? We heard the Or Zarua that said, I don't know why we light inside. So he says, I came to Yerushalayim, I see people lighting outside. Who gave them this psak? Were you greater than the Or Zarua? In the time of the Or Zarua, there wasn't a sakana, and they lit indoors. Who told you can go outdoors again? Okay? And all our rabbis who came after him, even though there was no danger in their time, as mentioned by the Or Zarua, they did not kindle outside. And why would you distinguish between Eretz Israel and other lands? Ouch. Okay? No, seriously, it's a painful sentence. Why would you distinguish between Eretz Israel and other lands? It cannot be said that it is different abroad because Jews reside amongst the nations. On the contrary, in ancient times when Jews lived in the small ghetto, their city gates would lock at night, and Jews could do so as they pleased in their streets without interference. In other words, there's an advantage of living in the ghetto. You know, sundown, you lock the doors, and then you can do whatever you want. They're going to stay out. Okay? So that couldn't have been the excuse why they did it indoors. Anyhow, he says, in my humble opinion, anyone who deviates, disagrees with the great poskim of the previous generations, etc., etc. Another one, Rav Sraya Devletsky. Rav Sraya lived in Bnei Brak. He passed away 6 years ago. Very, very prominent Talmid Chacham and Posek in the Bnei Brak area, but a very independent thinker. Okay, so he writes this. He says, let's see how we'll do this. Okay. Generally speaking, we should know that the primary fulfillment of Torah and commandments is specifically in our holy land. And here, with the help of God, we can fulfill all the commandments practiced in our time properly, with all their details. So he starts, there's a whole notion that mitzvot in Chutz La'aretz is only a tivilach tzionim, just so we won't forget when we come back to Eretz Yisrael. That's something that's very difficult for many people, all along Jewish history, to say, oh, everything we held on to, that's just so we don't forget. But it's an existing idea. But Rav Sraya here says, okay, we held on to it, that's wonderful. I just want to point out, he says, that these mitzvot were designed for Eretz Yisrael. And he starts going through mitzvot and saying, look, it's perfectly for this aklim, how do you say, climate, and for this time zone, and here he goes. He says, okay, the same applies to the mitzvah of lighting Chanukah candles, which can be observed here in the Holy Land with meticulous details as per the Talmud. The words of the Ramban in Parashat Achrei Mot are well known, stating that the essence of all commandments is for those who dwell in the land, and their observance in exile is only so that they will not be new to us when we return to the land. In addition to the mitzvot dependent on the land, mitzvot התלויות בארץ, like Shemitah and Masrot and Truma, like I had a close relative that came on Aliyah, and we quickly gave her the short version of Trumot, Masrot, everything you have to start. She says, my father was a rabbi, my grandfather was a rabbi, I never heard of these things in my life. So besides mitzvot התלויות בארץ, okay, even the general mitzvot are more comfortably observed in Eretz Israel than abroad. Firstly, in terms of convenient timing. For example, regarding the onset and conclusion of Shabbat throughout the year, okay? I was just in London, and we were studying some sugya with when the tzibur davened arvit already, and there's still time until after the shkia, until it has to do with when to do it, sektara, things like that. And in my mind, this is like maybe sometimes 20 minutes, And they said, no, ma pitom, shki'ah is 10 o'clock at night. And we bring in Shabbat, normal times. And I realized, London, they live in a totally different time zone. Mitzvot weren't supposed to be like this. Okay, so he's talking about Shabbat and not too early and not too late. Okay, the shki'ah and Motzei Shabbat. And in terms, and still we're always complaining, right? There's no Motzei Shabbat, there's no Friday, there's no Shabbat. And in terms of climate, the ability to fulfill commandments of the Sukkah, as written in the Torah, including dwelling in the Sukkah, and as well as the time of harvesting Shmora Matzah, which is not the time of rainfall, and so on. Okay? Also, the commandment of Chanukah lights can be observed in the best way possible in a public space. In practice, during the entire Galut, everyone lit inside, even in a place where circumstances permitted lighting outside. However, according to the fundamental law as per the Gemara, there is no reason to prevent it. And it is very appropriate to make an effort to to restore the crown of this mitzvah to its original state. Every year, more people are lighting outside. And the first who appears to have begun this, restoring this original practice, were Talmidei Agra that made Aliyah in the 50s, 60s, and the rabbis of Brisk and the Chazon Ish after them. Okay, let us imagine now, Rav Sraya says, and again, he's saying this. We spoke of the Haradit, and he's saying this in the middle of Bnei Brak. Okay. Let us imagine how pleasant and delightful it truly would be to see all of the cities and towns of Eretz Israel, Chanukah lights shining in the entrances of homes and courtyards. Not ish bal yader. And what a Holy Spirit and love for Torah and mitzvot it would impart to everyone. So we know this experience of walking in the street and counting Sukkot, and there's also the equivalent experience of walking in the street and counting Chanukah candles. Sometimes you see them in the windows, but sometimes they're right here on the street, and you feel this excitement of now that we and our mitzvot are back where they were designed for, okay? Now we can actually do it properly. Rav Chaim David Halevi says that really we have Medinat Israel and it's wonderful, but it's still Shat Sakana. Okay, we still have many enemies, and so we should continue to light indoors. And Rav Adaya is quite upset with that, and I'm cutting things short. But there's a very, very fascinating discussion regarding these things. So, short sikum. We start out with the outdoor option, but within the instructions, we always have but if there's Shat Sakana, you bring the candles in. And we hear from the OUisrael that even though there's no sakana in the 13th century in Vienna, he doesn't know why, but we're still lighting indoors. And the Rema tells us everybody lights indoors. And when coming to Israel, we hear different opinions. We hear the opinions that say, sakana is not only sakana, it's also litzim and irrelevant people out here, which is a very specific way of looking at, I'd say, the non-observant tzibur. And we hear the idea of you can't change a minhag, and who gave you the permission or the power to do so, and what's the difference between Eretz Israel and any other country. And then we hear this beautiful description of Rachelle, of how perfectly mitzvot are tailored for Eretz Israel. And yes, definitely, we want to see the street full of Chanukah candles. Of course, there's a lot more to say, but here I want to take the jump of trying to say something beyond this. When I was thinking about, it's an interesting discussion, the relationship between Pirsum Hanes and Mitzvat Kiddush Hashem. Because it sounds very natural that these would be very overlapping mitzvot. Okay? What's the idea of Lefarsem Nes? It's probably just a part of Kiddush Hashem. And I think it is, but there's hardly any discussion on that per se, on Pirsum Hanes as part of Kiddush Hashem. I want to think maybe another step further on the meaning of lighting candles in Eretz Israel, in a sovereign Jewish state. And for that, I'll take a jump that's quite a leap, and it will take a bit of patience, but a bit of a scary jump to Majdanek. There is a book by Rav Tamir Granot. I don't know how much the OU crowd knows Rav Tamir Granot. We've known him, I was his colleague many years ago, but he's a Rosh Yeshiva in Yeshivat Torah Shaul in Tel Aviv. And this past year, his son Amitai was killed in the Lebanon border in the very beginning of the war. And he's very active in trying to get the Jews of Eretz Israel to speak to each other. And, that's what the Rav Adaya said. I didn't read it. Rav Adaya said, when he was arguing with Chaim David Levi, he said, you're right, there's no Shat Sakana. Our greatest Sakana is the way we fight with each other. So Rav Tamir stands on the border of Majdanek, and he describes this he has a 2-volume book that's called Man and Faith in the Face of the Holocaust. And he goes through a lot of theologies of different Chassiduyot and how they deal with Shoah. And he describes that he was standing there and suddenly he had like a vision. And he writes down his vision, like in his journal, he writes down the vision. And in the beginning of the vision, he sees the medrash, a very famous medrash, of should man be created or not, right? And there's an argument, midat hachesed, midat haemet, right, shalom, and there are different opinions. Should humanity be created? And he like hears the medrash in his mind, and then his vision goes on. He imagines what continues in the, it's not part of the original midrash, but he describes how they, in the heavenly court, they bring all kinds, they're arguing, should we create humanity, should not, and it's obvious because, you know, when let's say, Midat Shalom says, don't create him because he fights all day, people weren't created yet, right? So obviously they're getting inner shock, like, how do you say the opposite of, they're getting insights into the coming history. okay? And that's why the chesed one says he's full of chesed, and the shalom one says he's full of fighting. And so he says they're arguing, and they're bringing more and more examples of what's going to be. And then at some point, they see where he's standing. And they say, uh-oh, if there's a place like Maidanek, if there's a place like other places he was in, if there's a place like Be'eri, like Nir Oz, that's not in the book, maybe we shouldn't create humanity. Maybe we should retract this plan. And they're just about to decide that not. And then he says, again, it's very dramatic. Moshe Rabbeinu comes over and says, I know, but maybe, and he starts, and Kadosh Baruch Hu says, silence, no more ta'anot. If you have something to prove, you can bring your proof, otherwise this is done. And this thought comes up that maybe, 2 years later, 1948, the experiment that we're a part of, the gift that we're given is a possible proof that it's a good idea to create humanity, that there is an ability of being worthy of creation. And he says this. He says, the two groups of angels. No, slicha, I'm not going to go through all of this. He says, and if Ribono Shel Olam, a date is set for the trial this year, do we have compelling evidence to present in the heavenly court? Will the verdict come out create? History has set two extreme alternatives. The Jewish people proved that it is possible to be weak and righteous, whereas the German people proved strength and power not only as natural traits, but as values, as ideals of a nation, forge a natural alliance with evil. Well, history has already proven that it is possible to be weak and righteous or strong and evil. However, is there also a third possibility on the battlefield of history? A strong and righteous people integrating the existence with human sensitivity and compassion. Can such a nation endure the arena of historical survival? You're asking myself, what does that have to do with Chanukah? Basically saying, okay, we already learned you could be strong and wicked, you can be weak and righteous. Is it possible to be powerful and righteous? And in his mind, maybe what we're going through is the test of can you be powerful and righteous. Now, during most of the years, being powerful and righteous has to do with having a compassionate society and being rodef mishpat u'tzedakah, and the legacy of Avraham Avinu. There are points in time, and originally I came to this thought a little over a year ago. There are points in time where the test of the righteous, is being able to use their power to eradicate evil. Okay? There's a point in time where the righteous, the compassionate, the soft-hearted has to understand that the gift they were given, now demands them to do things that are not of their original nature. To use the power to Ohavei Hashem Sin'ura has a practical side of it. Last year we were all the time talking of Zach's idea that the reason we don't understand why bad things happen is so we can fight them. If we would be too empathetic to why it exactly happened, we wouldn't be able to actually fight it. I'm bringing this in the context of some paragraphs in Rav Kook. It's common that Hebrew speakers in Israel quote Rav Kook and English speakers quote Rav Soloveitchik. So now we'll try to say Rav Kook in English. Rav Kook says in Orot HaMilchama, it's a collection. His son collected places where he related to the issues of war, because actually he passed away before the Second World War in 1935, but he was stuck in the First World War war in Europe. He couldn't get back to Israel, and he wrote a lot about it. And then one of the things he says is, we left global politics, forced out, but also internally relieved, until a blessed time comes when it will be possible to govern a kingdom without wickedness and barbarism. It is not worthwhile for Yaakov to engage in a kingdom when it needs to be full of blood, at a time when it demands the talent of wickedness. Okay? So we just heard the Kol Kol Yaakov Ve'adayim Edei Esav, and he said, you're right, we were forced into Galut, we were forced out of sovereignty, we were forced out of having our own kingdom, but the truth is, Yaakov feels comfortable not to have to dirty his hands, okay? Bloodshed is for Yedei Esav, not for Kol Yaakov, okay? And this was a very strong sentiment for many people that were discussing the Zionist movement before Eretz Israel. And two more paragraphs from him, okay? One is, I'm just saying, of course he's saying something very true to our nature, but once you're given this gift, okay, you have to live up to what it demands, okay? So on the practical level, Rav Kook doesn't work. So two more paragraphs from him. One is, he describes, in the same Orot HaMilchama, he describes how Avraham and David and the greatest characters of our nation were actually fighters. They're warriors. There are many, many wars that they fought, and actually many, many casualties in those wars. And then he says, the way they keep their focus is, they don't enjoy bloodshed. They're not there. In Israeli society, there was an expression recently, ochlei mavet. Okay, they're not excited about this stuff. It's not what gets them going. It's really, they say the pasuk, gam ki elech begei tzal mavet lo ira ra, and they mean, even when I walk through the valley of death, I don't fear milahafoch lera, from turning into evil, okay? Because I know why I'm doing this, because my values are clear, because I'm forced to do this, and the compassionate places are much more natural for me, then when I have to walk through the valley of death, I don't walk in the fear that some of this Amalekut will stick to me, that I turn into a bloodthirsty person, okay? Lo ira milahafoch lera. And then Rav Kook says this last part on Chanukah. He says this. He says, in normal times, we feel in the core of our being the courage of a public declaration. Let every inhabitant of the world know, those who stride in the lands of the living, that the light is an eternal inheritance for us, and from us rays shine forth, illuminating them and the world beyond, outside the entrance of our home. Okay? Our Chanukah candles, they're there to radiate around the world the light that we were given. The mitzvah of the Chanukah candle, this sacred symbol, is to place it outside the entrance of our home. Indeed, in times of danger, when evil winds blow across the world, wild hatred against Israel and its sacred nation, scorn and vengeance rule against all its holy possessions, at that time, the external glow cannot dispel the thick darkness prevailing there. So Israel turns it into its home and its table, to the internal possessions of our culture, to the purity of its spirit and the cleanliness of its deeds, to our Torah, the true Torah, special to him, and to his commandments, which are the paths of his eternal life, to build his home on the land of his holiness with all the strength of zealous holiness. And this candle, the emblem stored within us, testifies faithfully that nothing is lacking from all its spiritual magnificence and its honor of truth and justice. That's of Kook, it's worse in Hebrew. In the end, the distant ones will come and recognize that the heritage of the world, for the enrichment of all, for the victory of justice and truth, for the triumph of peace and establishment of human life and its firm and secure foundation. The heritage of all of nations is the end of days, will come not from another place, but from the house of Israel and its high table. Psukim in English sound terrible. Okay, don't change it. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. You will know how to say that in Hebrew. And the souls of all creatures will be filled with a thirst for all that is exalted and pure, for all truth and the faithful belief and the pure influence that will come from the light of Israel, which in times of danger placed it on its table, and that sufficed. And from Mount Hermon, descending on the mountains of Zion, God will command the blessing for Israel and humanity, as stated, and I will empty out a blessing, and all the children will return together to sing from the depths of heart and soul. This is my portion, this is my portion from all my toil. With Israel I live, and he will live forever. And may the storm of danger pass quickly in our days. We will return to the command of Chanukah candles to place it at the entrance of our homes from the outside. And all the ends of earth will see the salvation of our God on his people and is in his inheritance. Amen. Selah.